So right now we're in day 4 of week 6. We have one more week to go with week 7 next week, and then spring break, and then we start with spring practices. So we've been going since January 18th, and so it's been really good out of season program right now, and we're making good gains, and just picking up where we left off in bowl practice.
Thanks, Coach. We'll take some questions. We'll start with Stephen Brooks.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, Jason, I wanted to ask you, I saw you can't see me too well. I'm trying to work on this lighting thing, but it's not, you're not losing out on anything. Trust me. When you looked at last season, how many close games the team won down the stretch, did you kind of take that as a reflection of the work you guys did and how you build the program and everything? When you look at those late games, comebacks, finishing games late, I mean, even in the Peach Bowl, is that a reflection of you and your group, you think?
I think there might be a small part of us in that. I think one probably larger factor in that is the way that we train as far as practice goes. You guys have been out there and seen us practice, and I think the tempos that we go at, the physicality in our practices, thing like that. It's a 360-degree deal. Like, we're a small part of that by the way we train our players for the way we practice. But I think that a large part of it is the way we trained daily on the field in practice too.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think we have a question from Matt Wenzel.
Hey, Jason. Last year, Mel said he wanted you to, I think, execute the most rigorous strength and conditioning program in the history of sports. Yes. How do you follow that up this year?
Great question. Yeah, I got asked that last year, and I said, I think my response was no pressure, right? So we worked very hard last year. I would say that we towed the line of living right up against the red line last year with the way that we pushed our players. I would say, as far as a comparison and a contrast, the comparison would be we're still doing that this year. We're training very similar fashion to what we did last year. But do we have to make it harder or do more? This year has become very much more about how we do what we do. And so we talk to our guys a lot about sharpening the sword. This offseason has been a lot more about sharpening the sword because we were able to lay some groundwork last year with what we did as far as exercises and programming. This offseason is very much the same tempo, but I think it's been from a quality standpoint, I think we're ahead of where we were last year, just as from an advancement standpoint of some of the ways that we're training. But that is still the demand, and that is still the expectation, that we train very hard and push our players safely and appropriately. But that hasn't changed much as far as what was said last year. No, sir.
Thanks, Jason.
We have a question from Jim Comparoni.
Oh, you're on mute, Jim. I think you're on mute, Jim.
Okay, great.
Gotcha.
Thanks a lot, Coach, for doing this.
Yes, sir.
Hey, you mentioned that they're maybe better this year than last year, which is understandable. And can you expand on that a little bit? In what ways are they better? Is it the times, how do you measure that? Is it visual? I'm sure you measure it, but in what ways are they better? And can you expand on some?
Yes, sir. So the first way I'd say they're better is the blessing that it is to play in the bowl game that we played in by getting to have the extra almost month of preparation on the field practicing, but also training. We were able to lift that whole time as well. So then we played the bowl game, and we only had 2.5 or so weeks of off time before we started out a season program. Whereas last year we had like 5 or 6 weeks off. So that's a lot of ground to make up as far as getting back in shape to do the training. So we didn't drop off as much this year just by the sheer amount of time off with the players. We were able to kind of pick right up where we left off of the workouts we had in Atlanta and just hit the ground running. As far as a measurable goes, everything that we do is really, we execute it and then we measure it and we chart it against past performances to see where the trends are going. It's like, I can show you some stuff, but like if you can see that, you can see the trend line, the arrows pointing up. So this is like a single leg power graph, But what we do is we measure it at the beginning and then we measure it at stop points throughout the year, every 3 or 4 weeks. What we're looking for is trend lines across the team. Is where is the power trending? Are we going up? Are we leveling off? Or God forbid, trending down? And then positionally, like this would be like a graph of hang clean for what is this? The D tackles, right? So we want to see that trend line when we starting to work its way up as we get the spring ball. Then this would be, say, summer, and then we need to see that same trend line throughout summer going into camp. And so we do that for every single position. So every day there's lots of reports, but if you're not measuring it, you're just guessing. And so what we try to do is, I think one way it sells the program to our players is show the fruits of their labor. They can, they see it in the mirror when they take their shirt off or what have you, but they need to see what their production is, because it's, this business in general, it's not as much about weight on the bar as it used to be. Now it's a little bit more, at least for us, it's what are you doing with that weight on the bar? Because if it's heavy weight and it's moving slow, that doesn't show on the field for us. So we have to have a power component, a force component, and that's what we chase with our guys and teach them, how they've progressed and how to produce that force. And that's where nutrition is critical. You can't out train a bad diet. So you got to have great fuel in the tank to perform like a race car. And so that's been critical for us to have that piece.
I think we have another question from Matt Wenzel.
Hey, Jason, I know you guys announced like the Spartan Training Program, the STP thing. Can you kind of break down the difference between what you were doing since you started the off-season program to what that is as far as what it ramps up?
Yes, sir. STP, Spartan Training Program. What the STPs are is basically we had about a 4-week build up to where now the STP program is, it's kind of like the old way of like where the stations around the field, all the coaches, it's the first thing that we do as a team. Whereas typically we have them in 3 groups a day that are smaller. That's the first time we get back together as a team. There's 7 stations around the field. The stations last about 4.5 minutes. And it's activities that mimic the things that they're going to do on the field. And then they change positionally as, say, if the wide receivers come to a drill, they have to execute things a certain way. But when the O-linemen come to that drill, it's got to change for them a little bit. And so my staff runs those drills, and the players, it's like a giant carnival around the field, if you will, right, of all the different drills going on. And we try to make sure that we're hitting all of the different aspects that they need on the field. It's challenging, as you can imagine, but we try to build that up, that's a big conditioning day for us as well. But it's very sport specific conditioning. And so that's what STPs are.
Thanks, Jason.
Yes, sir.
We have a question for Matt Charbonneau.
Remember how to unmute. Thanks, Jason. I wanted to ask this about, we've seen Mel be very active in the transfer portal since he's been here. And when you have roster turnover, whether guys coming in, going out, you have early enrollees, all those things, how does that affect what you guys do? You talked about, sharpening the sword and guys understanding what's going on. Does that affect what you guys do when you have maybe a little more turnover than you're used to, or do you not notice that as much? How's it for you guys?
No, that's a good question. It does impact what we do as far as, so like I describe it like you got the high school kids that come in, and then you have transfer portal guys come in, and you could be melting 25 to 30 different strength training programs into one here. And so they all have different backgrounds and different experiences. Some places that say transfer portal guys have come from, maybe they don't do Olympic lifting, or maybe they didn't do certain leg activities, say with bars on their back or what have you. So then when they get here, the way I've described it to the portal guys is when I talk to them, I treat it very much like we did free agency in the NFL. In that the way we would talk to free agents was this: we'd say, listen, you know what works for you to play at this level because you're already here. So it's not abandon everything that you know at the parking lot and you have to do it this way and grip it and rip it, let's go when you walk in the room. We want to know what they're successful at and what they know works for them and things that they haven't done, so that we can slowly teach them how to do those things And we have time to do that. Everybody gets in a rush, but you do have time from January until through the, out of season into the summer program. We can teach that stuff, but it's not just a look at the guy next to you and mimic what you see, especially with them, because they have training backgrounds and they do know what's successful. And a lot of them honestly have come from really good programs and they've been well taught, and they jump in and they do very well, and they raise the level of the room because they are competitive, And so that's a really good thing for us, because it does raise the level of the room by having older guys come in, because they're ready to roll when they get here usually.
We have a couple more. Jim, do you have another question?
Yeah, could you expand a little bit more on your impressions of the transfers so far and the freshmen that have come in? What have been your impressions of them?
Sure. So for the transfer guys that came in, they've been outstanding. They kind of got here in a couple of different waves as far as being here on week 1, day 1, and then a couple of guys joined us a little bit later. But they've done a really good job. You take different guys, like say a couple linebackers that transferred in. They were with us from day 1, and so that's been acclimating them to the way that we train. And then also, I think a big difference for some guys is training as far as lifting and running on the same day. So you have to kind of dig in and take into account the volume of training that they're used to and allow for that and have some adaptation, because we do lift and run every day. And so that's unique to some guys, and they struggle with that at first. So we got to allow for that. Then you go on the opposite end of the spectrum, like with Amir Speed. He got here 2 weeks, I believe, or maybe a couple of weeks after playing in national championship game. So he played a few weeks farther than we did. So he didn't have as much recovery time. So we had to allow for that and make sure you can't throw him in the deep end with our guys, because we had more rest and recovery from the season than he did. So you got to meet him where he's at and help him still recover while getting acclimated. The freshmen that have been here, just been outstanding. I think it's a blessing for them to come early, because they get to get all the newness over with, and they learn all of the hard stuff in January. They don't even know the names of the streets or buildings right now. And so they're learning that stuff. So they'll be very comfortable in the summer. They've been great. They come from very good programs from the high schools they were at. And it's been wonderful having them, getting them, from everything nutrition to how we train. We go a lot slower with them. We really treat the freshmen like they've never been in a weight room before. It's so that we make sure they know how to do what we're doing safely. Because if you just let them go at it and just express their God-given athletic abilities, you're going to pay that debt back eventually, because they're going to get hurt. And we can't risk that. And so we go very slow with the freshmen and make sure they understand what they're doing, using this out of season winter portion to really teach them. Then we'll go into spring ball, and summer's off to the races.
Just to clarify, weight training is not part of the STPs. Am I right about that?
No, sir. No, sir. The STPs is just on the field.
Okay.
So you got Spartan Training Program, which that's what we're doing every day, all day. And then the STP part of it. And the STP part, the gas treatment, right? STP gas treatment, that's where it came from. And the letters matched, Spartan Training Program. And it was like all gas, no brakes. We're flying, set up the drills and let's go. That's kind of where that came from. And so that is purely on the field drill work as a team that we do on Tuesday mornings.
Just Tuesday mornings. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I think we have one more from Stephen.
Hey, Jason, curious about Jaden Reed as a guy, who sort of had a decision to make, comes back, and obviously still has that end goal in mind. So what are sort of your goals for him? I mean, obviously has a great year, but decides to come back for reasons, so what is, in this stage of it, what are sort of his goals that you have for him, he's had with conversations with you, and what's he working on?
Sure. So that's a good example with Jay Reed, right? He's already incredibly strong. He's got good numbers in the weight room, bench, squat, power, clean, and all that kind of stuff. So let's say he squats 500 pounds, which is pretty close to that, right? Does it really matter to get him to squat 520, being the player that he is? we're not chasing that anymore with him. If he benches 335 pounds, does it matter if he benches 345 anymore? It's not about those numbers anymore. So this is the like holistically sharpening the sword. Now it becomes force production, power production, any mitigating circumstances, that bumps and bruises and aches and pains from the season. Let's get those gone, right? Let's hone your skills on the field wise, as far as stopping, decelerating, things like that. But it becomes a lot more specific for a guy like him than it is globally. Hey, let's get you up to the strengths and conditioning levels that's expected in the Big Ten. That's what you would do more of freshman year, sophomore year, things like that. But with him, it's kind of like training a pro. You know, it really is in a lot of ways like training a pro, because he knows what he needs to practice and to play. So how do we get him back to feeling like that from a long season? And then what are the things that he needs to work on aside from just pounds on a bar? You know, because that to him is not what we're chasing anymore, because his numbers are very good.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We'll go to Colton Pouncey.
Hey, Jason. So,
Hi,
I mean, how's it going? You've been here a couple years now. Just wondering, is it nice to have some upperclassmen leadership to kind of set the tone for the younger guys and the newcomers?
It truly is. Beforehand, not literally, but it was like 5 against 120. You know what I mean? Because they didn't know what we were talking about, what the words we were using meant, describing things and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a lot more teaching and just explanation going on. Now that we've had 2 years of this, you take a guy like Xavier Henderson, right? X can finish my sentences now. So he knows what we're talking about. But a guy like him, he's going to prepare the guys for what Tuesday STPs are for guys that haven't been through it. And when we do a workout on Friday, strain train, he's going to, hey, let me explain to you what strain train is, right? Guys that don't know that stuff. So it's been really, really good. But then that part of it, then setting the tone in the room of the expectation that that's supposed to look like, so that if you guys walk in the room, it better look a certain way to the outside also, right? And so that's been really good, because now those guys get that. And it's been it's raised the level of what we're able to do, more so than just make it harder. That's the sharpen the sword stuff I talked about earlier, right? It's how we do it.
I think we have a couple more. If Jim, if you have another one.
Yeah, just one more individual I was interested in. Deshaun Mallory was a guy that made a lot of body changes last year.
Yeah.
How did that end up turning out, and what are his how do you chart his course for this out of season?
Sure. So Deshaun obviously had an incredible transformation, right? Nutrition, that's critical piece of that, which he was dialed in. I mean, if you talk to Amber, she'll sing the praises of Deshaun in the kitchen and his skills. He's incredible with that. You know, so with that, he's been really good about that. Is when you make massive transformations like that, you got to hold it for long enough that your body changes and that becomes your new normal, because your body's always trying to go back to what it's comfortable with. And so he's been able to do that now, to where like that's him. That the old version doesn't even exist anymore as far as body compositions and weights and things like that. He's a great guy in the weight room, works incredibly hard, and is put together last year, and then as of today, really good out of season programs. And so, you know, I expect big things out of him as far as what he's able to continue to do here in his career, because he works very, very hard at it. And he's become a guy, you know, like Colton was asking about leadership. He's a guy that is a great example to point to, but he's also a really good coach nutritionally and eating habits wise for some of our younger players. Because look what I did. This is how I did it. Let me teach you. And so I know he does cooking classes with Amber, and he'll teach the guys his favorite dish that he makes and stuff. And so he's just doing a lot of really good things right now.
If I remember right, he lost a lot of weight, and then even in August camp, there was talk that you wanted him to put another couple pounds back on. Was that true last August? And
yeah,
is he still adding from there, or is that equaling out right now?
He's good now. Yeah, but that is right. You know, man, he was looking really good in a bathing suit, and he was liking it. So he wanted to keep going, and we're like, well, you're gonna diet your way into you don't play with your hand on the ground anymore, man. So we got to change that. So we got him back up a little bit, and he gained a few pounds back to where the coaches wanted him. And he's been able to maintain that now, because instead of making that massive change, you're talking a fluctuation of a couple, 2, 3, 5 pounds here or there, and able to maintain that. And to be honest with you, he's so dialed in nutritionally. He knows it day to day of what he needs to do to get it back on. Or if he has a Super Bowl Sunday, he knows what he needs to do on Monday to get rid of that a little bit. He's just really, really sharp.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And we'll wrap it up with Stephen Brooks.
Okay.
All right, Jason, I wanted to ask you about Kenneth Walker, actually, sort of looking back. I see this reaction. So that, as last year happened, we kept hearing that sort of the first time people sort of turned their heads with Kenneth was in the weight room, obviously, with you guys. So if you could, I'm curious just what you first remember sort of noticing about him, but also maybe what does that do for you when your best players, you know, attack the weight room sort of the way we heard that he was, and when your best players are leading the way in the weight room and all that?
Yeah. You know, so, okay. So K9, I would tell it to you how I described him to all of the NFL scouts that came through. He never lost a rep of any run that we ever did the entire time he was here. He crossed the line first every single time. And so that became to the point where we're like, hey, slow down. Like we got to dial this back a little bit, because he just go, 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 go. And so that was the thing I could tell him. I was like, all the things that you're going to hear around the building about him, they're all true. He's a better person than you're going to hear about him as a player. But from our standpoint, he's like, how many people have you ever heard player-wise somebody say they've never lost a rep the entire time they were on campus? And he didn't. And so to your point of when your best players work that hard, that's the standard that's set, that one, this is how it has to be. But two, we're all clamoring to be that guy. And there's the blueprint for it. So how could you do anything less than that? Now, God-given abilities, my speeds, things like that, that changes stuff. But maximizing what you're capable of doing, that becomes the standard. And then you're held to that daily. And that's what he was able to do for us. There's a lot of players that are able to do that for us. But he was special. And as a person, as a guy, as a worker, and obviously as a player as well. And so, yeah, we hung his book up on the wall here as like a little bit of shrine to K9, but he was great, man. He was awesome.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
All right, Coach. Well, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for the update. A lot of people were asking what was going on with the team and everything. So we appreciate the update.